You can't pour from an empty cup. Unknown. You have been committing slow suicide in the name of virtue. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you give from an empty cup, every time you sacrifice your well-being for others' approval, you are not being noble, you are being self-destructive, and the world is not better for it. The statistics paint a devastating picture of our collective self-abandonment. 76% of US workers experienced burnout in the past year. 21% of people have let guilt get in the way of taking time for themselves, with Gen Zers most likely to feel burnt out at 73%, followed by millennials at 57%. Among caregivers and helping professionals, 34 to 50% experience high levels of compassion fatigue. These aren't just numbers, they're millions of people slowly destroying themselves while believing they're being good. Today, we're going to explore one of the most revolutionary concepts you'll ever encounter, that putting yourself first isn't selfish, it's sacred. That caring for your own needs isn't narcissism, it's necessary. That the art of sacred selfishness is not about hurting others, but about healing yourself so completely that you can serve others from abundance rather than depletion. The great martyrdom myth. You were raised on a lie so pervasive, so deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness that you mistake it for moral truth. The lie is this: good people sacrifice themselves for others. Good people put everyone else's needs first. Good people give until it hurts and then give some more. The more you suffer for others, the more virtuous you are. This martyrdom myth has created a generation of walking wounded, people who believe their worth is measured by how much they can endure, how much they can give, how completely they can erase their own needs in service of others. You've been taught that self-care is selfish, that boundaries are mean, that saying no is a moral failing. But let me ask you something that will shatter this illusion. What kind of service can you provide when you're running on empty? What kind of love can you give when you hate yourself? What kind of strength can you offer when you're broken? The martyrdom myth doesn't create better helpers. It creates bitter, resentful, burned-out people who give grudgingly rather than gladly. The brutal truth is that your self-sacrifice isn't making anyone's life better. It's making everyone's life worse. When you're exhausted, you're irritable with your loved ones. When you're depleted, you resent the very people you're trying to help. When you're running on fumes, you make mistakes, poor decisions, and create more problems than you solve. Your family doesn't need a martyr. They need someone who's alive, present, and genuinely happy to be with them. Your friends don't need someone who says yes to everything while secretly resenting every commitment. They need authentic connection with someone who chooses to spend time with them because they want to, not because they feel obligated. The self-inventory starts right now. Look at your last week. How many times did you say yes when you meant no? How many times did you give time or energy you didn't have? How many times did you put someone else's convenience ahead of your own well-being? If the answer is more than zero, you're practicing self-abandonment, not virtue. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love anybody else. And if you love yourself, you cannot hurt anybody else. Buddha. The economics of energy. Your energy is your most precious resource, and you've been giving it away like it's infinite. But energy, like money, operates on principles of economics. You can spend more than you have for a while by going into debt, but eventually the bills come due. And the bill for energy bankruptcy is always paid in the currency of your physical health, emotional well-being, and spiritual vitality. Every commitment you make is an energy investment. Every yes you give is an energy expenditure. Every boundary you don't set is an energy leak. You've been operating like someone who spends money without ever checking their bank balance, wondering why you're always broke while continuing to write checks you can't cash. The people in your life deserve the best version of you, not the exhausted, depleted, resentful version you become when you give beyond your means. They deserve someone who chooses to help them from overflow, not someone who helps them from obligation while secretly keeping score of their sacrifices. The investment strategy for your energy requires the same wisdom you'd apply to financial investments. You must generate more than you spend, save for emergencies, and invest in things that will create more abundance over time. This means saying no to energy drains and yes to energy gains. It means protecting your energy like the finite resource it is. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. Audre Lorde, the oxygen mask principle. Flight attendants give you the most important life instruction you'll ever receive, and most people completely ignore its deeper meaning. Put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. This isn't a suggestion. It's a survival strategy based on irrefutable logic. You cannot save anyone if you're unconscious. Yet in every other area of your life, you try to put everyone else's oxygen mask on first while you slowly suffocate. You give and give and give until you're gasping for breath, wondering why your help doesn't seem to be helping, why your sacrifices aren't creating the outcomes you hoped for. The oxygen mask principle applies to every form of nourishment you need: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. You cannot give what you don't have. You cannot teach what you haven't learned. You cannot offer peace from a place of chaos, love from a place of emptiness, or wisdom from a place of confusion. This principle reveals the fundamental flaw in martyrdom thinking, the belief that you can sustainably give more than you receive, that you can be endlessly depleted without consequences, that your well-being is somehow less important than everyone else's. But physics doesn't care about your noble intentions. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. If you're constantly transferring your energy to others without replenishing it, you will eventually run out. The daily practice of putting your oxygen mask on first means checking in with yourself before committing to others. Am I rested enough to be present for this conversation? Do I have the emotional capacity to hold space for this person's problems? Is my cup full enough that I can pour into someone else's without resentment? This isn't selfish, it's honest. It's acknowledging the reality of human limitations instead of pretending you're superhuman. It's taking responsibility for your own well-being so you can be genuinely helpful to others rather than burdening them with your depletion. When you consistently put your oxygen mask on first, something beautiful happens. You stop helping from a place of martyrdom and start serving from a place of abundance. Your help becomes more effective because it's coming from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion, from love rather than obligation. You owe yourself the love that you so freely give to other people. Unknown. The boundaries revolution. The most radical act you can commit in a world that expects your endless availability is to have boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're gates with you as the gatekeeper, deciding what gets in and what stays out based on what serves your highest good and the good of those you genuinely choose to serve. Your lack of boundaries isn't kindness, it's cowardice. It's the fear of disappointing people overriding your commitment to your own well-being. It's the belief that other people's comfort is more important than your sanity. It's the confusion of being agreeable with being good. Boundaries begin with the revolutionary recognition that you are not responsible for other people's emotions. You are not required to manage their disappointment when you can't meet their expectations. You are not obligated to sacrifice your well-being to maintain their comfort. Their reactions to your boundaries are their responsibility, not yours. The boundary setting process starts with identifying what drains you and what nourishes you. What activities leave you feeling energized versus exhausted? What people bring out your best versus your worst? What environments support your well-being versus deplete it? Once you know what serves you, you can begin protecting it. But boundaries without enforcement are just wishful thinking. You must be willing to disappoint people, to be called selfish, to have others question your choices. This is the price of self-preservation, and it's a price worth paying for the prize of authentic living. The beautiful paradox of boundaries is that they actually improve your relationships. When you stop saying yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningful. When you stop being available for every crisis, your presence becomes valuable. When you stop giving grudgingly, your gifts become genuine. People who truly care about you will respect your boundaries because they care about your well-being. People who get angry at your boundaries are revealing that they value your usefulness more than your happiness, and that's information worth having. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. Brené Brown. The guilt detox. Guilt is the enforcement mechanism of the martyrdom myth. It's the voice that tells you you're being selfish when you take a break, mean when you say no, and ungrateful when you prioritize your needs. This guilt isn't your moral compass, it's your conditioning, and it's time for a complete detox. The guilt you feel about self-care was installed in you by people who benefited from your self-sacrifice. Parents who needed you to be easy rather than authentic. Partners who preferred you compliant rather than boundaried. Employers who wanted you available rather than balanced. Friends who liked you agreeable rather than honest. But guilt is not a reliable guide to moral behavior. Guilt often arises when you're doing exactly what you should be doing, protecting your well-being, honoring your limits, choosing your priorities consciously rather than automatically. The absence of guilt doesn't indicate moral failure. It often indicates moral growth. The guilt detox process involves questioning every guilty thought. When guilt arises about taking time for yourself, ask, who taught me that self-care is selfish? When guilt emerges about setting boundaries, ask, whose interests are served by my boundarylessness? When guilt appears around saying no, ask, what would happen if I honored this no? You'll discover that most of your guilt is inherited, not earned. It's passed down from generations of people who were taught that their needs didn't matter, their well-being was secondary, their value was determined by their usefulness to others. This generational guilt has nothing to do with you and everything to do with systems that benefit from your self-abandonment. The guilt antidote is self-compassion. Every time guilt tries to convince you that caring for yourself is wrong, counter it with the truth. I deserve the same care I give others. My well-being matters. Taking care of myself allows me to better care for others. I'm not responsible for managing other people's reactions to my boundaries. You have been assigned this mountain to show others it can be moved. Mel Robbins, The Sacred Self-Care Foundation. Sacred selfishness isn't about becoming narcissistic or uncaring. It's about becoming so grounded in your own well-being that you can serve others from a place of abundance rather than depletion. This requires honoring your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs as non-negotiables rather than luxuries. Your body is not optional. It's the vehicle through which you serve others, and it deserves maintenance. You cannot give your best to others when you're running on 4 hours of sleep, surviving on caffeine and convenience food, sitting all day and never taking breaks. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and rest aren't luxuries. They're requirements for sustainable service. The emotional dimension involves processing your feelings instead of stuffing them down to be available for others. It means having outlets for your stress, anger, sadness, and fear so they don't leak into your interactions. It includes seeking support when you need it, instead of always being the supporter. Your mind requires protection from overwhelm and constant stimulation. It means creating space for thinking, reflecting, and processing instead of constantly consuming and reacting. It includes learning to say, I need to think about that, instead of immediately responding to every request. The spiritual component involves connecting with whatever gives your life meaning beyond serving others. Whether it's nature, meditation, prayer, art, music, or simply quiet reflection, you need sources of renewal that fill your soul rather than drain it. Rest when you're weary. Refresh and renew yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit, then get back to work. Ralph Marston, The Transformation of Service. When you master the art of sacred selfishness, your entire approach to helping others transforms. Instead of serving from depletion, you serve from overflow. Instead of giving grudgingly, you give gladly. Instead of helping because you feel obligated, you help because you choose to. This transformation affects the quality of your service. When you're well rested, your advice is clearer. When you're emotionally balanced, your support is more stable. When you're physically healthy, your energy is more sustainable. When you're spiritually connected, your presence is more healing. The people you serve notice the difference. They feel the authenticity of your care rather than the resentment of your obligation. They sense the strength of your support rather than the fragility of your depletion. They receive the gift of your presence rather than the burden of your martyrdom. The sacred. No. The most sacred word in your vocabulary should be no. Not because you don't want to help, but because you understand that saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. Every yes to someone else's agenda is a no to your own well-being, your own priorities, your own life. The sacred no is not a rejection of others. It's an affirmation of yourself. It's the recognition that your time, energy, and presence are precious resources that should be invested consciously rather than scattered randomly. It's the understanding that you serve no one by destroying yourself in service. Learning to say no requires deprogramming years of conditioning that taught you your worth depends on your availability. You were taught that good people never disappoint anyone, that helpful people always say yes, that loving people sacrifice themselves endlessly. These teachings have created a generation of people who can't say no without guilt, who can't prioritize themselves without shame, who can't set limits without apologizing. The practice of sacred no begins with small declinations. Say no to the social gathering that drains you. Decline the extra project when you're already overwhelmed. Refuse the favor that would compromise your well-being. Each no is a yes to something more important: your sanity, your health, your authentic priorities. The sacred no becomes easier with practice because you begin to experience its fruits. More energy for what matters, less resentment in your relationships, greater authenticity in your choices, and the profound relief of living according to your own values rather than everyone else's expectations. People will test your no. They'll guilt you, pressure you, make their problems sound urgent, or suggest you're being selfish. This is their conditioning meeting your awakening. Hold your no with love, but without compromise. Your boundaries are not negotiable. This revolution doesn't happen overnight. You'll have setbacks, moments of guilt, times when you revert to old patterns of self-abandonment. This is normal. Change is a process, not an event. Every time you choose yourself over others' expectations, every time you honor your needs despite pressure to ignore them, every time you say no with love, you strengthen your sacred selfishness muscles. Your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship you have. Robert Holden. The art of sacred selfishness is ultimately the art of sustainable service. It's understanding that you cannot give what you don't have, that you cannot teach what you haven't learned, that you cannot offer peace from chaos or love from emptiness. Today, give yourself permission to be sacred in your selfishness. Put on your own oxygen mask first. Set boundaries with love. Say no without guilt. Care for yourself with the same dedication you show others. Not because you don't care about others, but because you care about them enough to show up as your best self rather than your depleted self. The world is waiting for your gifts, not the gifts of your martyrdom, but the gifts of your wholeness.